We're close. Not quite there yet. We're close.
Here, let me write it, my landline down on a piece of paper.
And it was on 3/22 that I sent the email for my
Oh.
citizens.
That sounded like somebody
To your
being.
city email.
Okay.
All right, it is now 6:30. Let us call this meeting to order. It is the April 6, 2021 City Council meeting. The first things on the agenda is going to be some public hearings for activities in the scenic corridor. So the first thing we need to do is call roll. So Mayor Pro Tem Villalobos.
Yes.
Councilmember Bunker.
Here.
There she is. Councilmember Shell Allen.
Here.
Councilmember McLeod. Uh-oh. I saw him on there.
He's muted.
Is he muted? Or-
Yeah, he's
He's
muted.
Can you
muted.
hear me?
There he is. Thank you.
I'm here, okay.
All right, Councilmember Clinton
Here.
and Mayor DeVinny is present. Let's rise to say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank y'all. All right, first thing on the agenda tonight is public hearings. We've got a request, an application for a certificate of appropriateness to construct a fence in the scenic corridor at 1006 Northwest River Road and 1008. Apparently it's owned by the same person. And it is, the map's up there, Jared's pulling it up. Is Martine on? He's not here in the room.
D Estrada?
Oh,
Yeah.
I saw he was trying to get in.
Sylvia's the other one.
So the location of this, the location of this property is down along Highway 80. Splits Northwest River Road and Highway 80. And it is just north of either Hermanos or the Packensack. I don't remember which one.
Vermont, between the two.
Hermanos in the back.
Oh, so that's where it's at. He's requesting to put a fence up on both ends. It looks like that. It's gonna look like that. And of course, the purpose of the public hearing is if anybody wants to ask questions about this or make comments, the public is due to do that. Anybody here in the room want to make a public comment on this? Feel free to raise your hand. Yes, sir. Mr. Latimer.
What is going in there? Or why does he want the fence?
I do not know that we have any specifics on that yet, do we?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Is it just on one end and the other and not the sides?
Correct.
Correct.
It's perpendicular to Highway 80, both
Yeah,
locations
okay.
of the fence.
All right.
Is he on there? Can we ask him?
He's on
He is not, is he now?
the Estrada.
Yes.
Yes, they're on.
You can ask him.
Hello?
What's, D Estrada, is that who's talking?
No, that was someone else.
That's someone else.
Yeah, this is from Martine Garcia is the applicant. He is not on here. Has the council got any questions? I'm gonna go around the room. Sonia, you got any questions?
Well, I mean, even if I did have questions, nobody's here to answer them.
I have the application, and so I can answer them based on the application.
Well, okay, the height of the fence, oh, excuse me. Sonia.
So, I mean, no, because, I mean, I've read what's on the application, but
Okay, so you don't, I say it, you have some. Go
The
ahead.
height of the fence, it doesn't say here, or do we have, like, I think the standard height of a fence would be 6 feet?
Yes, under 6 feet is exempt from building codes, and from what I understand, he's not trying to go get a building permit for this.
No, I think I may have a little bit of insight. I did have opportunity to speak with Mr. Garcia, and apparently, in looking at the location, the area where the fence is going to be, isn't that separating his property from the Texaco?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. And so and this has been, a month or more ago, when I had opportunity to speak with him, it has having to do with literally the trash that blows from the dumpster and or the area where the Texaco is onto his property. And so I know that was a chief concern.
And Lisa, it's also on the other side of the property between the Hermanos and the property line.
Correct.
Nice looking fence.
Question, this is Jan.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So the reason why you had to have two appropriateness was because it's considered on two different lots, even though he owns all of it.
Correct. A different lot.
I don't know if you heard that. Yes, that's correct.
So
Because it's on 2 different properties.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other question? Mike, you got any questions?
Has there been any concerns from his neighbors?
Good question.
City staff has not received any concern. Unless there's neighbors in the
You
room.
got some close neighbors here, but the Schultzes are here.
Yeah.
But they're not speaking, so.
Letters were sent to the neighbors.
All the neighbors did get letters, or at least attempted to. We get a lot of
Hello.
returns.
I'm Dia Estrada, and we live right across the street from the property. And we were
Okay.
just wondering if the fence was going to be on Highway 80, but it looks like he's just doing the 2 sides.
Right.
So, and we were just wondering if that was because they were going to build something there or not, but it doesn't sound like they have those plans yet.
Yeah, we don't have that information.
Okay, but the fence is only on each side, separating the Texaco and then the restaurant from his property.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Sam Clinton, City Council, I've noticed that he has had a water meter installed on the property. And within his request also, he mentioned that Blue Bonnet Electric Co-op is going to be installing a telephone pole. So it looks like he is seeking or receiving water and electricity for that location, and it is zone commercial.
Mixed use. We'll have to look. I'm pretty sure it's mixed use.
Mixed use.
Mixed use, okay. I just know that there are no gas lines along there, but when he is constructing the fence, when he's making these big holes for those metal supports, what precaution or who does he need to notify during the construction of the fence? What is the parameters of that?
311 is the 411. You call before you dig, and they come out and mark it.
It's already marked.
It's already marked.
It's already marked, okay.
The lines, if it makes good, the only lines on those properties right there border Northwest River Road.
Okay,
That's it, that's all I got, thank you.
And then for it being like in the scenic corridor, because I know whenever the dollar store had to do their building, so just a wooden fence like that is okay.
Yep.
I don't understand the question.
Well, I mean, like Dollar General had to have
Right.
certain features and certain things,
Right.
whenever they built it. So I guess this type of fence is allowed in a scenic corridor.
Correct.
That's up to the city council. That's why it goes through the public notification process and public commenting.
I don't
And
know.
anything built in the scenic corridor it has to go through that process. At this time, he's only putting fencing in. He's likely looking at other development opportunities, but he hasn't made any application to those to the city at this time.
From a building code standpoint, I don't believe that, I don't know of any, I mean, that's 600 pages of stuff, but we've looked at the fence stuff before, and I don't.
Fences 6 feet or less are not subject to the building code.
Right.
Okay.
And anything over a certain height is, I think it's 10 feet, have to have some extra stuff, but 6 to 10 is.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Since he is in the scenic corridor, does he have to do this again for those fences?
No, this is for the fences.
Yes, but it's, so this is just for the scenic corridor.
This is just for the certificate of appropriateness. This is to tell him, yes, that fence
Okay.
will do that. He'll still have to come in and apply for a building permit.
If it exceeds the height, but
Oh.
to this point, there's been no indication that that's going to be the case.
Okay. So this okays him
Okay.
for the scenic corridor too, for those fences.
This is the purpose of bringing this for the public hearing is only for the scenic corridor certificate of appropriateness
Got it.
for the fence, the 2 sections of fence that he wants to put on his 2 properties.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I know what you're asking. If he comes in for building something else,
Yes,
then he'll have to come back for another certificate of appropriateness,
Correct.
whatever that
Right.
is.
Yes.
That's what you're asking.
We're just concerned about the fences right now.
Just the fence. That's all this is today. is the fence. Okay, with that, unless somebody's got another question going once, going twice, we will say that the public hearing has completed and the questions have been answered on that. That moves us on to the public comment section of tonight's meeting. And this is any citizen who wants to talk can, we'll give them 3 minutes, up to a total of 10 people. And we have one of those so far. We did not have any that came in over the wire from people off site. But we do have one for Mr. Latimer and to talk about why Martindale needs a public library. And so Jeff, you're up.
Does that mean I get 30 minutes and
No,
somebody else is here?
You get 3 minutes, so get started. And this will start dinging at 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Tell me when to start.
Start.
Just over 2 years ago, Trish and I moved to Martindale to be closer to our grandchildren. Martindale seemed like a nice, quiet, friendly place on the San Marcos River, with its main street harboring City Hall, a municipal court, and the Martindale Water Supply Corporation. There was also the Martindale River Cafe providing good food and music on the weekends. And finally, there was our library, which was most reassuring to me as a source of knowledge, a connection with the outside world, much like the excellent 2020 movie with Tom Hanks, News of the World. So this has been an important resource for me. But then I was told, a lot of people here hate each other, which was hard to understand in such a beautiful, bucolic setting. And I was told, people here are mean. And I was told by the city fathers, watch out, you're going to get your ass kicked for simply speaking to children at the Allen Bates River Park, children who were almost always accompanied by their guardians, except those turned loose with pit bulls as their only protection, as they struggle to keep them under control. I used to take my dog Mama Grace there for daily exercise while I picked up loads of trash left behind. But then sure enough, one summer day, I was verbally assaulted by a half dozen severely inebriated adult river goers simply for asking them to turn their music down. Then I was with Mama Grace once again at Allen Bates one day last fall, when a man pulled up next to me, grabbed me by the collar, put a knife to my throat, and said he was going to kill me if I ever had contact with his family again. Apparently, he thought I was a child abuser, but had not gone to City Hall to check this out. Maybe he didn't know he could do this. Since Martindale no longer has a school system, the library is a place children can go to have stories read to them through the pre-K story time. This allows parents and children to enjoy a guided time for reading, arts and crafts, song, and movement. Meetings can be held there, and seniors are often offered help with their tax returns. There was an elderly couple just this afternoon doing exactly that. The library assists with holiday functions, including our upcoming Spring Fling Kite Day. There is computer, printer, and internet availability. The library added Wi-Fi extenders to the downtown area. All these invaluable services are free, not to mention the hundreds of books in their significant ebook collection available for checking out at no charge with a library card. There are multiple other learning business resources too numerous to list at this time. Based on these experiences, maybe our library could be a source of tolerance for religious and political diversity here in our fair city. Maybe we could learn to talk to one another before jumping to conclusions. Maybe we could learn to go to City Hall to resolve differences. Maybe we could let go of the meanness and hatred and learn to work together toward making this fair city a model of reason and tolerance. Maybe we could all strive to be the positive change we want to see here in Martindale. I feel our library could play a large role in this process. Thank you for these considerations. And if you want to know what the world without books is, just check out Fahrenheit 451, which I did and I'm reading, and it's a world without books. How'd I do?
Did good.
All right.
I can't figure out how to turn it off.
Oh, see, I told you. 30 minutes.
All right, thank you, Jeff. With that, we are through with our public comments for the night. That gets us to reports and announcements. The mayor's report's up next. Election activity, of course, election's coming up, begins on the 19th with early voting. Election day proper is 5-1, Saturday 5-1. We've got a election worker training session scheduled for 4:15. We did get our first round of the voter registration rolls today, and the folks are checking that out to look for any kind of obvious errors or whatever. And so things are on track for that. I do want to talk, especially when we get to the future meeting sessions, about when we want to canvass this. There is a potential issue with our next May meeting if there are provisional ballots. And so when we get to future meeting dates, we need to keep that in mind. A few meetings ago, we talked about giving folks credits for the missed week of solid waste pickup. Voted to do that. That's gonna come out in the April bills. The total will be a $7.36 reduction for folks on their bills. It'll have the message that you see up there. Credit memo shown on this bill is a credit for the missed pickup day on 2/17/2021 due to the winter storm. Just want to let you know that's coming up here in another week or so. That'll be going out. So council, be aware that that's coming. The other thing the council needs to be aware of is we got notified this week, or actually last week. We got a letter in the mail that said we were having some legal action taken against us, the city. We referred that to TML, who handles our liability activities. The incident that they're concerned with did not occur inside the city limits. Was not responded to by our folks. That really doesn't have anything to do with Martindale. We're getting that word to the people who sent us the letter, and I think this is just going to go away. But I think every council member's probably got one of these letters in their box in there, so I wanted you not to be floored by it without knowing what that's all about. Flood mitigation grant for Northwest River Road. The initial score. I need to know how to learn how to use their phone. The initial scoring was completed, and the city remains eligible for this grant. That's good news. A second round of questions and other information was initiated by the GLO on March 18th. That was a Thursday. Everybody needs to remember that we're closed on Fridays. They requested a large amount of information by close of business the next day, which was Friday, giving the city about 36 hours to respond. Jared, I was out of town that day. Jared called the team together, worked Thursday and Friday, and made the deadline for submissions. We've since then talked to the GLO folks about this, and they thanked us for the quick response, and still we're still in the running for this. So if the council remembers, the process was we had to apply, we had to go, then the GLO would go stack all the people up based off of their scoring criteria, all the applications. I was on a conference call this week where they talked about for the $1 billion worth of grants that the GLO was going out with this go round, there was $5.2 billion of requests. But the fact that we got these questions means that we were above the cut line. So we're high enough on the score that this is beginning to look pretty good. And I would also like tonight to publicly thank Jared, Sylvia, Thomas Turk, Gary Freeland, Julie Langford, Jill Finney, which is a Langford folks, Jessica Bickford and Aaron Thomas. Those are both work for Langford, for going above and beyond what would normally be expected to keep this opportunity for the city of Martindale alive. They really did a great job of identifying the information that was requested, finding it, prepping it, and getting it to the GLO in, like I said, a very quick turnabout. So I do appreciate all of those helps. And of course, they said that last week that the next step in this process is the selection of the individual projects, which ones win effectively. They had hoped to get that done by March 31st, but due to the winter storm, they got delayed, but they will have that out in April. So we should have some notification of how we stood on this before the end of the month. And with that is all I got.
Hey, Mayor, since you were on that one, for the grant, just if you could just briefly just say, just state like why Northwest River Road, just in a short little synopsis. It's not like I live on Northwest River Road, do you live on Northwest River Road? And we're like, hey, let's do Northwest River Road.
No, the money that is dedicated for this, the $1 billion that they're handing out is all related to the Harvey storm back in 2017. It was Caldwell County was one of the counties that was included in the disaster declaration, and this money was earmarked for 70-something counties all around the coast of whatever. Caldwell County was lucky enough to be one of those. Lucky enough because we didn't have a whole lot of damage from Harvey, but was included. The purpose of this money, that the $1 billion, is to go address flood mitigation activities. So we have to go spend it on places that flood. And as we all know that live in here in Martindale, the area right there by the old Creighton School Cemetery is a flood area. The area around past the shoe curve over there by Mike McLeod's house, goes underwater every time we get a 1/2 inch rain. The roads get cut off, people have to make turns, etc. And the third area is the Quail Run Northwest River Road intersection. When you go look at the drainage associated with that, it does get flood water comes over that a little bit because the drainage is poor. But at some point in time, that's typically that road's going to get washed out if we don't go do something with that. So this grant was not focused on the benefit of council members. This grant was focused on working on flood related issues. We're hoping that one of the biggest benefits of this are the folks that live over there off of Plains Drive and front on Northwest River Road. During rains, those fields fill up with water and they actually run behind those houses through their backyard. We have pictures of terrible flooding in those folks' backyards, and we're hoping that this activity, we're planning on this activity to take care of that problem as well. So this is all addressed to go off, all designed to go off and address the flooding along Northwest River Road. That answers your question?
Thank you.
That brings us to the city administrator's report.
Good evening. So I want to focus this report on the American Recovery Plan Act. which is part of the 1.9 trillion stimulus package for COVID and recovery. So all municipal governments under this act are entitled to direct federal funding from the coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund. What that means is we don't have to apply for it. It just comes to us. And what we're projected to receive is close to $270,000, according to the House Committee on Oversight and as reported by the National League of Cities. So this is good news. It's free money to the city, though it's probably coming from taxpayers somewhere down the line. So what I'll go through and kind of describe what happens there. So eligible uses include responding to the pandemic or negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, or hospitality. Paying for premium pay to eligible workers performing essential work as determined by the city during the pandemic, providing up to a $13 per hour above regular wages. And probably there's a couple cut off on the bottom of the screen here, but one of them is the provision of government services to the extent that the reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. So that hasn't happened to Martindale to a large degree on the general fund side, but it's happening on the utility fund side with delinquencies. We'll get to that in a second. So this is basically to make our books square. The bottom of this screen also mentions that we have the ability to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. The rules surrounding this have yet to be published. They're going to be published by the Department of Treasury, U.S. Department of Treasury. It's expected that local governments are going to have to keep a detailed accounting of the use of these funds. However, those rules have not been published yet. The turnaround time for all of this is pretty quick. I think for small cities, they're trying to get the funding dispersed within the first 120 days when the bill was enacted. So it's 4 months. I mean, that probably puts us about July-ish, July, August, of when we could see the first disbursement. They're expecting this to happen over the course of a year or possibly 2. There's some conflicting information out there on the internet, but in 2 tranches. It's not going to be 270 all up front, be broken out. Cities that are 50,000 or more in population are going to get their fund direct from the U.S. Treasury. Smaller cities, they're going to go through the state. The state has to give it to the smaller cities, or else they have to pay a penalty back to the federal government. So it's pretty much expected that we'll be working with those funds. The plan also I want to stop there real quick. So this is a big deal when it comes to our wastewater issues, our wastewater system issues with our lift stations, specifically Crockett lift station, where we're staring down the barrel of a $20,000 repair item. This becomes an opportunity for the city to take these funds and invest them in expanding our infrastructure in a way that benefits our customers, add additional customers to our utilities, or do other good that can benefit the city in a strategic way. So I'm working to develop some courses of action. If city council members individually want to send me ideas that you have that I can include in kind of my consideration that for a future agenda item, go ahead and send that directly to me, and I'll prep it for a future discussion in an open session. But this is good news. This is really good news.
I wanted to ask you on the slide that was before, how it talks about with the water, because the water is separate from the city. Do we have to like negate funds to the water department, or is that totally separate and they're doing it on their own?
So it's not an and, it's an or, so the city gets to choose. I have begun discussions with the water company about potential uses for this that might be beneficial to both the city and the water department. As you know, in the $6.7 million grant for the hazard mitigation, where we're pulling up the road and putting in culverts, we've included the water supply corporation in that for the removal and replacement of some of their water pipes that have aged. This funds could potentially be used on something like that. The rules are that Treasury puts out going to kind of dictate it. But I'm in conversations with the Water Supply Corporation, have made outreach to TCEQ and Water Development Board on what it would look like if we were to integrate our operations more closely, and what considerations the city would have to make if that's something we want to pursue in relation to this. So that's one of the areas that I'm looking very closely on. Also expanding our network of our sewer system, wastewater system for additional customers. And it could also be used as if there is a sewer line beneath a road that needs to be replaced, could potentially be used for that. And along with it, a road gets replaced for as far as $270,000 will take us. Likely won't be for just the 270,000, but because we have a lot of delayed or deferred maintenance in our wastewater treatment system, but a bulk of it should be available. So that's one of the reasons why I don't have a recommendation or didn't put on the agenda a discussion item for action regarding the Crockett lift station repair, is because this came to light, and I want to be able to understand what those funds are going to need to be used for, what rules are going to apply to that, and whether those rules need to be published before we use those funds on that repair, or if we pay for it out of our utility fund now, could we reimburse ourselves later? That's kind of unknown. So that's one of the reasons why we don't see the Crockett lift station on the agenda right now. Other financial programs tucked in that act that are of interest to our community is economic impact payments. Those are the direct payments to individuals, the ones that you likely heard about in the news. Child tax credits, increasing the tax credit limits and providing for direct payments of those in advance. That's a huge program for individuals. There's state level programs separate from the local programs regarding fiscal recovery and capital project funds. That I'm not sure, the state of Texas hasn't put out what they're going to do for that, but there's another opportunity if the state of Texas decides to make some of that available under, for competition, Martindale and the region could look for something there. A lot of it's kind of geared towards future transportation and those things. Homeowners assistance fund, so that would be dispersed via the state. That could help delinquent mortgage payments. And there's emergency rental assistance, also managed through the state, to help people pay rent and utilities. So one of the items we'll discuss tonight is the order regarding the emergency order that kind of suspended shutoffs. There was a program tucked into this recovery plan similar to the energy assistance that people can receive for those 150% or below the poverty line that get electric or gas support, included water and wastewater as a new federal program. And that's a whole new thing. I reached out to TML. They haven't seen any guidance put out by it, but that could have some bearing on how we address those delinquent accounts. Not to say we want people to continue delinquency, but those who are in dire straits may have an opportunity to apply for some benefits in that area. There's also the state small business business credit initiative and employee retention credit and paid leave credits programs. Those are for companies, small businesses to help continue to keep folks on their payroll and pay them as they go through this difficult time, and then unemployment compensation for those who lost their jobs. For those who want to get a quick fact sheet, the treasury.gov has a fact sheet on that rescue plan. You can find out more information, start looking around, Googling it out. The National League of Cities also has a great website that goes line by line, area by area for housing, medical, and different programs. This is a huge bill, but no need for anybody to read it all, but there'll be plenty of information coming out in the future. So, and it does impact city operations and our community. And I was going to provide a quick update on the hazard mitigation grant. Again, great minds think alike. Anyways, good sign. We expect to get award information by the end of April. And again, it's $6.7 million project with a 1% match. So that's huge for the city. And that's all I have. Subject to questions.
Great news.
Questions? Going once, going twice. All right, moving on to financial report. Here's Dwayne.
Okay, you should have a copy of the financial reports for the month of March 2021, year to date. Beginning, we have bank statement balances as of yesterday. You see the balances of the general fund, street fund, court restricted, police restricted, utility fund, utility deposit fund, and the community development fund, totaling $181,698 at First Lockhart Bank. Cash positions are in line with this time of year. You see we have $222,208 in the emergency fund. We recently made a deposit to that fund based on council decision. The Public Funds Investment Act, Public Fund, I believe that's right. Fund you see here, you see accrued interest or accumulated interest, I guess. You see our excess general fund overflow. That comes from property tax revenue that comes in generally in the second quarter of our fiscal year. And I'll draw down on that as we need it as we go through the third and fourth quarters of the fiscal year. Hotel tax continues to accumulate. And then you see we've got some of our utility deposits over there. That fund totals $198,229. And then we have a long-term capital improvement fund. We made a deposit to that last month. It's up from about 128 to 132,000, including a reserve for the patrol car that you approved purchasing. I continue to check on that weekly, and evidently there's a backlog in parts to outfit it. So, but I check with them weekly to make sure that there's not some bigger city that's getting in front of us, and he assures me they're not. And you see the amount due the comptroller for fines listed there. The next report is the budget report for the general fund. At March 31st, we are 50% through our fiscal year. So as you look at percentages along the right column, the target is 50%. Property tax revenue, as I mentioned earlier, largely comes in the second quarter. We're collected 93,000. We have only about 23,000 left to collect for the year. Other line items that you see, municipal court revenue continues to be behind plan. And other, hotel tax revenue continues to be strong. And then other designated funds that I'll eventually get moved over to a different fund from this general fund. So revenues were at just about 80% of the revenues through 50% of the year. Personnel expenses, you see we're at 45% of budget through 50% of the year. So those line items are in line. Then our operating expenses are at 45% through the year. There's a few of them that are over budget, or at least over percentage wise, but nothing striking there.
What is that? That's the 650% of budget.
Municipal fee revenue, that's kind of miscellaneous fee revenue.
Why is it at that number?
Well, there are just odd amounts that come in that we don't know where to classify. The one that I think of is this little thrift store across the way. It gives the city a contribution now and then. Just miscellaneous unbudgeted items that come in.
So I have a question about that, Mr. Anderson. If there are, even more than 2 of those kind of items, would you sort of bookmark those types of things so that when we get a little further on to budget season, we can possibly direct and determine if we need to either create a new item for such or make determinations as to where those things might go? Please,
Sure.
sir. Thank you.
So you mentioned the grocery store gives a little money?
No, it's the little thrift store.
Max House.
Oh, Max House. Okay, I see. Okay, thank
As
you.
I understand it, that's part of their agreement with Carl, that they make a contribution, so they did.
Thank you.
And we didn't quite know where to put it, so since it was kind of a de minimis amount, we just put it there in
I get
miscellaneous.
weird stuff every now and then. The budget of, what was it, 400, 250, what's the?
$200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's based off of history. So this year's been a little strange. I don't know what the 1,300 is. I think we got $400 from Max House, so another 900 out there somewhere. You'd have to go look, see what it is.
Yeah, well, we got, remember last month we got like $540 from one of the movie set people for filming around here.
Oh, yeah, that was the police car rental.
Yeah,
So is that basically like a donation
Yeah.
line item? So any donations that we would take at a city would have to be reflected in there?
Yes.
At the city, we can go in there.
Uh-huh. So whatever it is, whatever kind of donations to the city would be in that, reflected in that line item with
I
other,
think there's significant filming permit fee revenue that's showing up in there.
No,
well, permits are on another line.
permits on another line. This was they needed cars with the flashing lights to do something. Hey, what the hell did they use those for?
So basically, they wanted the patrol cars to just be parked, not even running, just to block streets. And I invoiced them $10 an hour per patrol car. And so that was equaling 26 hours a day. So yeah, one day they did 13 hours. So yeah, I billed them $260 for patrol cars one day and 200 and some odd dollars the next day.
They did this back when they were building 130 out there, or 110. What's the freeway?
130 and 45. We
Yeah.
brought in almost $22,000 or $23,000.
Because they need cars to block off exits and stuff in the middle of the night, and so it's.
And I personally would like to see when we get that kind of income that comes directly from, as a result of police service and or the cars, that be funneled into the police department to help pay for vehicles.
I do specifically note it's income for the police department. I don't necessarily have a earmarked,
Okay,
account other than for their training.
sure.
But we do have a lease line item for the police cars when that one does get delivered.
Okay.
Okay. As I look down, contractual expenses, 53% of budget. Janitorial services, I continue to work to get reimbursement for those increased expenses related to COVID. And library contributions, those contributions have both been made for the year, so that one's showing 100%. But net income over expenses, $180,495 year to date. And the city is budgeted to break even by the end of the year in the general fund. Next report is the vendor balance detail. These are payments that were made to vendors in the month of March. Anything jump out there to any of you guys?
The appraisal district, so we pay them for property taxes on a quarterly basis, or how come the
Yes, but-
dates in that is in March?
We do pay them on a quarterly basis. There's two components to it. One of them is for the collection of the taxes, and one of them is for the actual appraisal services. So that is paid quarterly, and I guess one of those bills was dated the first part of March.
How about Civic Plus?
Our website.
Oh, that's our website. Okay.
Website provider.
One annual one-time cost, and I think we have another year with them before that contract runs out. We either keep going, or we'll probably put it out for bid. So
Actually, the price goes down.
does it have? Oh yeah, because we
Advertising.
basically financed some of the setup costs and annualized it over the course of the 4 or 5 year contract. And so we keep with them, that you'll see that go down by a few $100, I think, or
So
more.
there's an annual fee, and then there was this setup cost of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but they spread it over 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, I don't know. But, so there was two pieces that got added together, but at the end of this contract, the creation of the thing fee goes away, and all we have is the annual fee. So it gets cheaper.
Okay.
Oh, and one thing to note, that last item there, Woods Comfort Systems, that was the only expense we had from the winter storm that I'm aware of. One of the circuit boards went out on the,
Eric, if y'all remember our Saturday marathon in here a few weeks ago, it got hot in here. Well, that's because that board went out and the air conditioner quit running.
okay. Okay, the next report is the budget versus actual for the Martindale utilities. For the wastewater and solid waste services, you see it half the 50% through the year. We have billed exactly 50% of the income, right at 50%, and our expenses are 48.5. So that fund is on track for the year to break even. And then the next page is listing of expenditures for that fund for the month.
Any questions?
I believe that is it.
Thank you. Need to. This is the bills, the vendor balance detail.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that. That's,
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the court report. Judge, you out there still? I saw him on the list.
I'm here. Good evening. How are y'all doing?
We're good. Thank you, Tony. You're up.
All right. There you've got, everybody's got the report in front of them. That figure you see there on the first page, that's what we're going to owe the comptroller for this quarter. And everything else, the monthly numbers on the first page, followed by the reports and summaries on the second, on the following pages. If anybody has any questions, I'll try and answer them. We are going to be opening up and running a little bit more here over the next couple of weeks. Trying to get everything back to normal, whatever that means. But so anyway, if anybody's got any questions.
Tony, have you and Kent got a date set up where we're going to start working through this backlog of
Actually, we're still working on a date, but we're going to get that hammered out in the next couple of days, and then we'll get notices sent out and start it going. So we'll just, I think we've got enough to where we can still schedule. We can probably, the log that we have, we can probably get everything knocked out in one afternoon and keep social distancing and all that if we stagger it just right. So anyway, just be back to business as usual. I'm sorry.
While y'all are talking scheduling, remember that this room we're in tonight is tied up from 4/19 till 5 and 1
Yes.
is a Saturday, 2, 3, probably till through the 4th.
Yes.
By the time we get everything cleared out.
Yeah, well, I expect it. I mean, like I said, I like to give, plenty of notice on hearings just as a matter of practice. And that I expect that after the election, that will be taking place immediately thereafter.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we had those conversations earlier today. Tony and I actually spoke, and that was one of the considerations, was that we can't do anything until the room isn't tied up.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody got any other questions? That brings us to the police report. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
The blotter is not available. The CopSync software that the state went down, and that's where he gets all the detailed information associated with that. So as soon as he gets that fixed up, he'll be emailing that to the council members. And of course, we can go over it again at the next meeting. All right, that brings us to boards and commissions. The Historic Commission, I didn't see Craig out there. Anybody there from the Historic Commission? Going once, going twice. You see anybody on the list?
Yep.
Oh, I have one thing about the police report. Can I mention something? Or are we past it?
Let's pass it.
Okay.
There's nobody out there.
I don't think so.
All right, so there's nobody here from the Historic Commission. The Parks Commission, Sam, last time we were going to have Angela was the
Okay.
new anointed leader.
I have an update on that. Okay, so thank you, Sam Clinton, the chairman of the Parks Advisory. Well, currently I am the chairman because we did elect 2 new members to the Parks Advisory Committee. Angela Jimenez did get to be elected the chairperson, but upon speaking to her recently, she wishes to just be a member of the committee and not the chairperson. So that's why I'm speaking tonight. And so we will also, I'm not sure if the city received a letter of resignation from one of the committee members. You have. Okay, so we have a vacancy now. And so I did get a request from one of the workers of the Dig Us Together that are sponsoring the cleanup on April 10th. Also, I have a past application from Susan Schoon, who wanted to be on the committee. So I'll be reaching out and asking those people to submit applications again for the committee. Also, we will be doing an inventory on the dead trees and shrubs. There's one of the trees at Allen Bates Park is dead. It's on the backside of the playground, between the playground and the basketball court. It appears to be dead. So I'll be reaching out to the committee and we'll be doing an inventory on those dead trees and shrubs. Something that the Parks Advisory Committee needs is a storage shed to store our hoses, our tools that we'll eventually have for volunteer programs. So that'll be something we'll talk about, is a storage shed. Also, Volunteer Day, as I mentioned, with the Dig Us Together is coming up on April 10th from 10 to 12. That's the same time as the citywide cleanup. I would like to make a request to have the committee reach out with these other groups that lead volunteer groups so we can sort of work hand in hand and possibly work with the city, or at least have the committee notified of these volunteer days that are coming up, because I knew nothing about it. I found about it on Facebook. So I knew nothing about this. And I think that the Parks Advisory Committee should be in the loop when we do have volunteers that come and work in our parks. I've noticed too that the speed on 1979 through our parkland is very fast. Wednesday morning, a car crashed into 304 Farm to Market 1979 and crashed through the house. So that's something that happened. I think we should start reaching out to TxDOT to start to control the speed on 1979 as our parks become developed. We have parkland from the bridge at 1979 running all to Allen Bates Park. Also, I've noticed on land north of Phase 1, there is a porta potty on private property in the floodway. So that isn't very good. We need to talk about that. Having a
Take that
porta
address
potty.
again, please. Can you take that address again, please?
What is it?
Tell me the address where that's located.
I'll get that to you later, but I don't have the exact address. We will be picking a new chairperson. We want to have a volunteer day in May to plant some shrubs and put in the 2 new trash cans at Allen Bates Park. And then I would like to see a discussion and action item, perhaps. I thought it was going to be in the meeting tonight for a water meter for Allen Bates Park. That was not on the agenda, but I thought it was going to be. One last thing is I've had a request from the library to have a resolution to have a collaboration with the library and the parks in order for the library to receive certain grants. So I don't know if I need to make a resolution or something, or if the city would just go ahead and do it, but that's the request that I have received from the library. And also there's a rolling garbage can in Phase 1. And so I don't know if the city put that there or what. It's a rolling garbage can near the limestone blocks.
It's a TDS can. I was down there today.
Yeah, there
I
was
thought
one,
y'all put that.
Ruben mentioned that. Of course, he's been the one going down there and, cleaning those out and putting them up every week now. There was 2 of them there at Allen Bates. I thought we only needed to have one, only had one, but there've been 2 for a while. I don't know where the second one came from. But then one day it disappeared. We didn't know where it went. Now I spotted it down there, and I don't know who took it down there. It wasn't the city employees. Harry didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Do we want to have a can there, or that just seems like extra trouble for them to go pick it up?
I don't know. They don't go down there and pick it up. Somebody's gonna have to move it to the road. And I don't know whether, I thought maybe one of you guys did it to go.
I saw it there, so we'll need to speak about that but that would be an additional pickup, I would assume, with.
Well, they'll have to move it up to the road. We could go tell them that one's part of the park process, and they'll drive by 1979 and grab it. it, but I mean, every week somebody will have to go and drag it up there.
Yeah. Would Ruben do that in the course of his work on doing Allen Bates Park on Mondays? He's doing it?
It's a typical 96-liter cart.
But it's way down there. And that road is dirt. I mean, pickup trucks can get over there easy.
Let's talk about that offline. That might be an option.
I mean, you know, that may be good if it comes out of the park budget, but if it is all the way down, maybe that could be added to something, but if it's coming out of the park budget, then I'm sure Ruben would like a little bit of extra cash. If he's gonna include that in his job details.
If we continue to see that it's overflowing, or if the absence of it is meaning more garbage to pick up, I think we should consider having a garbage can there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
I have some questions.
Okay.
So with our boards and commissions, usually there's minutes taken. Do you have any minutes for the Parks Board that you turn into the city?
Yes, I turned them in to Sylvia.
And they're current?
We're current, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, I wanted to know, as far as for the water meter at the water department, did you put the deposit under the city name or under your name? Whose name is the water meter under?
Well, the water meter hasn't even been initiated, or actually doesn't exist. The necessity of it, or the availability of it through Martindale Water Supply, is directed directly to the city of Martindale. I also, though, if you think of, we did receive some donations from Friends of the Park amounting to $151, which is still being retained by the Martindale Water Supply under the heading of the city of Martindale. So, I don't know if that's what you're referring
So
to.
it's a donation that was made by the city of Martindale, but Martindale did
No,
it.
it wasn't. It wasn't.
But it's under the name of the city of Martindale is what you just
Because the
said.
money was allocated towards the meter, the purchase of the meter, in order to bring the price down to less than $1,000.
I just think that if anything is gonna be done in the city, or if there's gonna be donations taken on behalf of the city to do, you know, projects in the city, that we need to have receipts for those. The money needs to be accounted for. The money needs to come directly from the city. That way there's transparency there, because I know, do you have receipts for the donations?
I just got what I received and gave it directly to Martindale Water Supply, and they have it retained as a check there to apply towards either the meter or 3 months of water bills.
Okay, see, I think like with any of the parks boards that we have, that there needs to be clear parameters that they have to follow. Number one is minutes. Minutes should be taken and minutes should be submitted. If the meetings are gonna be throughout a certain times of the, you know, at the month, then we need to be consistent about the, you know, having the minutes. Just like you wanted to be notified about the cleanup days, I, as a citizen, sent an email to you to try to talk to you. I did not get a response. I made several different calls to try to touch base with you and did not get callbacks. So with any of the historical river parks planning, whatever, they all need to follow the same guidelines and all be on the same page.
Okay, that seems right. I have submitted minutes. I have given copies of it to Sylvia. She has received updates of the last meeting we had. And the money that was received is still sitting there at
I know,
Martindale
so-
Water
so
Supply,
you-
waiting for the meter to be purchased.
Okay, so you said it was a check. Who is the check from?
When we had the meeting, the Parks Advisory Committee meeting, and we were talking about the water meter, the Friends of the Park and the people that are on the Parks Advisory Committee contributed cash. And we had all of us there witnessing the amount of money that each individual was giving. And we were trying to get the $1,150 down to $999 in order to have it easier to purchase water meter. $151 was received and given directly to Martindale
Okay,
Water
so it was
Supply.
cash, because earlier you said it was check. I'm just trying to
It was
clarify.
cash, but I wrote a check and gave it to Martindale Water Supply to prove that that amount was written in a check to Martindale Water Supply.
Okay,
So the
which
bottom line, if I may, I was just going to say the bottom line that I'm hearing is that if in fact that's the way that it played out, and or if in fact there's ever anything in the future, then in reality, what that money needs to happen, needs to happen with that money is it needs to come to the city. And then the city would then in turn write that check. So when it funnels through, be it a resident or a committee member, it definitely decreases the transparency. Am I following correctly?
yes, just that's with any group that's going to be collecting money on behalf of the city. There needs to be transparency there, and it needs to come through the city with the receipt paper trail.
From the city administration perspective.
Yeah.
We don't want to be dealing with earmarked special, if residents or community members want to make a donation to the general fund, they can. But we're not going to set up special restricted fund accounts for every project that a nonprofit wants to do within the city. So if that funds wants to come to the city, they can go to the general fund like all other donations.
Which we saw in the line item.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we got issues with that, but just all the committee guys need to be wary of money. Don't, come ask for guidance. Mr. Dwayne will be more than happy to help figure out how to go off and make something happen if you can.
All right, question.
All right, planning and zoning. Lisa, you're on.
I
You
have
got
nothing.
anything?
I have nothing to report at this time.
And then the Martindale River Board is,
Joy's on.
Joy's on somewhere.
Unmute her real quick.
We're working on it, Joy.
Hello,
You there?
I'm
There she
here.
is.
All right. I actually don't really have anything to report yet. I mean, anything new. We're continuing to monitor, the disposable container ban issues at Skull Crossing, the Highway 110 bypass construction. We're looking forward to the April 10th cleanup day. Unfortunately, I cannot participate personally because I'm getting my vaccine. So there you have it.
Well, good for you. All right, thank you, Joy.
Mr. Devaney,
Yes, sir.
could I add something to that? I'm on that mail list, and I got a letter from the Commission of Environmental Quality, and there is the River Foundation, Texas River Protection Association, the City of San Marcos are going to be in a case. It's going to be a contested case within 180 days. So I was going to let everybody know that HR development, which would eventually dump into our city park, it will be a hearing on that. And now, if I hear anything, I'll let everybody know.
All right.
Okay, looking at the consent items, we got some minutes, the January 19th thing, this one, Sylvia, this is the one that Mike had a question of. Is that true? Last meeting?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can I say something, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm look at the second page. It's down about halfway through. It's three things tied to this issue. And then down below, it said McClab wanted to know if the area in the floodway and based on the floodplain maps based on the 97. No, it should, I think I stated it should be based on the new updated 2015 flood maps. That's the one point. If we could change those minutes to that.
17.
What's that?
I believe they're 2017 maps.
Well, the maps before December 30th of last year were the 2012 maps. And on December 30th of 2020, they became the 2020 maps.
But I know we're talking about minutes, and I know I'm pretty sure I stated that we should be going with the with the updated 2015 flood maps. Because it said
I'll go back
issue
and look on that
on
now.
97. I think that's what I said. And one more
Okay.
thing, it should be based on the 2015 updated flood maps and should follow FEMA requirements, which I sent to Jared about that FEMA document that I sent you a while back, Jared, called
Yes, I'm aware of it. Yes.
Property
So if
Acquisitions.
If you look at the underlined piece there, associate on that page 2.
What's that?
That's what Sylvia went back in there and listened to the tapes and put that back in there, I think.
But it said based on the 1997, doesn't make any sense. Flood
Yeah,
based on the
that
1997.
piece doesn't, but that was on there before. The underlying thing was what I thought you'd questioned, so we got that in there. We'll go back and double check the thing. It ought to say, what you're interested in is making it based on the map that just became effective. Is that
Well,
correct?
no, I know in the minutes, I know when I've talked about this before, and I'm almost positive that I said it needs to be based on the updated 2015 flood maps, and it should follow FEMA requirements. I'm just saying, I'm just talking about the minutes. That's what I remember what I said, and it says based on the 1997. That doesn't make any sense.
That's true. 1997 doesn't make any sense.
I just asked
2015 doesn't make any sense.
clarification. All I'm
either.
asking for is
It's 2012
clarification.
and 2020. We'll go listen to it
You
again.
have both recordings, right?
We don't have to
Like
do that.
Jared, don't you remember that I sent you that document?
I know the document you're referring to. I have it.
Okay, I did not.
The reference of that is what the land use guidelines regarding buyout land. We have 2 recordings of the meeting, both Zoom and a backup, so we'll be able to get that correct.
And I didn't quote that. I did not quote that document per se. I just said should follow FEMA requirements. That's all I said. And that's the only thing and like I said, that's a clarification I wanted just for the minutes. We're talking about minutes here, That's how I understood. Does anybody on council remembers that, my discussion? Anybody?
No.
Not word for word. That's why we got the recording.
Oh, just listen to the recording. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it looks like the minutes needs to be tabled, that piece of it. The accounts payable, anybody got any questions about that while Dwayne's here?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
Wait a minute.
Wait, what?
So you wanted to accept the accounts payable?
The financial report,
No, the accounts payable. These,
everything he went over.
No, this is a different.
So the report and the consent items are bills we have received but yet paid, right? And so it's kind of a formality of getting these bills paid, of bringing it to council.
So we haven't paid those.
We haven't paid these ones yet, no.
but they're all current.
That's what's always in
66,000.
Oh,
Okay, so the motion should be to accept the accounts payable.
yes, the account.
We have a motion to accept the accounts payables of shown
Lisa
tonight.
second-
What was that?
I second it. Lisa seconds it.
All right, Sam, how say you?
I don't know. I'm just looking at it. Okay, yes. I mean, I can see it there.
Jan,
Aye.
Mike,
Yes, aye.
thank you. Passed. All right, that brings us to discussion action items. Discussion on possible approval of certificate of appropriateness for 106 Northwest River Road and 108 Northwest River Road. This is now to say yes or no on the certificate of appropriateness for the public hearing that we had earlier.
Make a motion that we approve the certificate of appropriateness application to construct a fence on one side of the property to 1006 Northwest River Road, Martindale, property that is inside of the scenic corridor.
I second. That's Jan.
And seconds. And Sam,
Aye, yes.
Sonia,
Yes, sir.
and Mike.
Aye.
All right, that was 8A.
I'll make a motion
Wait.
for B, the exact same thing for item B, a certificate of appropriateness application to construct a fence at 1008 Northwest River Road.
I second. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
You did good. Mike,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
and Lisa. No, not Lisa.
Yes, sir.
All right, they both passed. Thank you all very much. All right, that brings us to 9A, discussion on the April 22nd, 2020 order to suspend utility cutoffs. The history on this, of course, is that we had the governor declared a disaster in March of last year. We quickly followed up with our own local disaster declaration due to COVID. As part of that, the Public Utility Commission of the state went in there and put out some orders to suspend cutoffs for electricity and water. We followed suit in April, make sure all that was clarified. The Public Utilities order, electricity was relieved at sometime in the summer, and the water was relieved a little bit later, I think by into August. We have never gone in there and relieved our order to not have shutoffs. However, with the governor's order GA 34 that was released on March 2nd, we pretty much put everything back to, he pretty much put everything back to normal operations. So the question now is, are we ready to go off and do that here within the city? Sonia, you had some comments 2 or 3 meetings ago that you weren't ready to do that. You didn't think that was right yet.
No, I still have that feeling. I think that there's still, a bunch of people that are dealing with the ramifications from the pandemic. I don't think that that's something just because, everything has, in a sense, gone back to 100%, that means people are 100%, financially recovered from serious issues that came from not having a job, having an illness that, severely impacted their health. Not only that, we had the snowstorm that came, that also they had to deal with fixing their house, pipes and stuff. I think it's too early still. That's just my opinion.
I have a question and a possible idea. In the beginning of this meeting, Jared was very detailed about government assistance programs that can be applied for, yes, for municipalities, but some couple of websites he stated for individuals. So my question is, I certainly agree with Councilmember Villalobos in regards to, we definitely have residents who have not recovered. I'm not sure that some people will ever fully recover, but nonetheless, we do have to move forward. But I feel like it's important for us to do that. When we do that, to do it in conjunction with education. So one question that I do have is how many accounts are we not shutting off because of delinquency? That is question number one, is how many of them are there? Then also number two, in regards to, are those have they come in and be set up on payment plans? And then to wrap up my entire statement is that I would like to see, if in fact that's going to happen, that they also be guided through, how they can apply, so that at the end of the day, the city doesn't have to bear the full expense. And then also that there are some who would not be necessarily just taking advantage of it because they could. So,
So we can answer a couple of those questions right quick. The number last week that we're getting letters was 9.
mhm.
So that's the number.
It's rising to about 24 are who could receive a letter. We have even more than that that are less delinquent, I think. No, it's 24. 24 is the number. Never mind. 24 delinquent accounts with total cost of $5,665 as of I think last week. 2 of those accounts have been on a payment plan and have defaulted on that payment plan. One's a business and one's a private resident.
So to either confirm or dispute, maybe I didn't hear correctly when you were in the beginning of the meeting, but are you aware of either websites or programs that individuals can go to apply for assistance specifically for utilities?
There is a program. It's the Low Income Housing Wastewater Low Income Housing Water Assistance Program. It's modeled after the Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program. Basically adds additional funding to the Energy Assistance Program and expands it to include water and wastewater, which is a first for the federal government.
And is this for individual to submit,
that's for an individual to apply. The basic requirements are going to be under that Energy Assistance Program. The requirement, if you qualify for energy assistance, you likely will qualify for the water assistance. The cutoff is 150% of the poverty line published by the Census Bureau, I believe. There's 2 bureaus. One does, they come up with different poverty numbers.
So thank you for answering that question. I would like to see.
It's not out yet though, so it's coming. But the way that works is kind of like other individual low-income assistance programs where it's funneled through the state. The state has yet to pick the ball up on that, on what the federal government passed and expanded or provided guidance on that program. And there's really no indication from TML's perspective of when that will happen.
I'd like to see be it a document or a blurb on our website that even though it's not ready to be applied for yet, but to be explained with those websites, and maybe even in conjunction with the library, having, if folks could, go to the library if they need help apply, making those applications when they are available. I definitely would like to see if we're going to continue to hold off and not follow through with the cutoffs. I feel like we need to do the right thing and help people get the assistance that we need and that they need. Excuse me.
I can put the information up there of the state agency that manages it, that will likely manage that program.
Yeah.
But they don't have an application process set up for it yet.
Yeah, just have something, put something up there, and like you said, those who did come in with a payment plan, 2 of them have defaulted on it. Specifically with this, all of this, be it the winter storm and COVID, applying for this type of assistance when it is happening, I think should be part of that payment plan application. A box that needs to be checked. You agree to pay X amount of dollars, but you also have gone through the process to apply for these services.
Okay, yeah. And the website for that, I'll put it on ours, but for those who might be participating in the public today, the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs is who will likely manage that program. And we've tried to reach out to them, and we've reached out to TML. TML has responded back that they haven't heard anything yet from the state.
So Jared, here's just an idea, and thank you, Councilmember Shell for your
Yeah.
words, but here's just an idea that I'm tossing around. So what about whenever Mayor DeBenny is transitioning out, the people that need to get letters, you send the paper in there with the list of different options that you could do, and then this is the date that it's gonna implement. Does that seem fair?
The shut off being implemented or the,
But like, here's the options.
yes,
This is a date that it's gonna, not be in effect anymore. Here are your options. These are your options for a repayment plan. But after this date, it's gonna resume back to normal.
yeah, we can easily do that.
That is basically what we've done.
The only change would be to highlight the rescission of the mayor's emergency declaration.
Uh-huh.
That would be the only change, but the rest of it, we can add some language.
Okay. I mean, do the other council members like that idea or have any suggestions?
No, I think
Jan,
that's spot on. I think that's a good time frame.
Jan, you want to weigh in on anything here?
Yes, I feel like, I think that's a good idea. I really want to reach out to these people that are in arrears, give them options, but yeah, I think we do need to set a date of when we're going to resume back with the cutoffs. I'm not sure how much more work there's going to be. I worry about people getting too far in arrears if something doesn't happen. And I really, really would like to reach out to these people before we start saying, no, I'm sorry, we're just cutting you off. We have to give them options.
Yeah, I was correct myself, 23, not 24 accounts in arrears. The average is $246. Now you have some skewing in there with some high dollar big ones, but that's the mean average is almost $250. So that's quite.
I think we talked about.
One of the concerns I have is also fixing our ordinance regarding the application of deposits. So right now, if we were to enforce our current ordinance, they would have to pay back their deposits, and they likely will need to also. But if we're considering changing that deposit threshold per previous city council discussions, we may want to take action on that ordinance first. And we can have that. I was hoping to have it ready this time around, but
I say put that on the next agenda.
The hazard mitigation grant kind of snuck up on us and hit us pretty hard. So we could put it on an agenda item for in April, or we can make it one of the first agenda items under the new council after the canvassing of that election to go through that ordinance. And those who are running for election, or depending on how quick soon after that election we have results, I can prep the individual candidates to give them the history on what that ordinance change is, answer their questions. That way, in May, we could vote on that, set a date for how we want this to roll out, handle the mayoral declaration, and put a bow on it.
It's in my experience that when we've got something like this that we've been talking about and dealing with it, that we've been in essence carrying on our back, we need to go ahead and deal with it before we have a change of guard. It may.
That's not going to happen, so you can quit worrying about that.
reference to looking at the ordinance and making any adjustments on the ordinance. That's what I'm in reference to. And then the other part about it is that, for our next meeting, I would like to see, I think we had talked about this before in regards to contact being made to those individual families who are in that kind of, in an arrear such that they could potentially be turned off. If in fact there's 23 households in that situation, I'd like to know at our next meeting how many of those 23 that we've had direct contact with and who've come in and you know, what their status is. I mean, I don't need to know obviously individually, but you know, have we made contact with 100% of those people? Have we made contact with 50% of those people? And if so, what's the problem with the other 50? You know, I'm like Jana, I think we definitely need to.
Oh, we got this down to 9. Carmen said it was 9 that you got.
Depends on what you're looking at your threshold in terms of days delinquent. And the days delinquent will shift depending how many accounts there are. It's going to shift based on when the report's pulled. So if someone's delinquent today and then they pay tomorrow, they'll fluctuate on and off the report. And then when the billing is run and things. And so,
So what we could, to Lisa's point, I believe that the number is relatively small. And if we haven't talked to 100% of them, we're close to talking to 100% of them.
Okay.
And there's only been 2 that we know of that have applied for the, in a year now, have applied for the deferred
Right.
payout thing.
And they both defaulted.
And both defaulted. And all of that information was put on the webpage back last summer when we started this whole mess.
Right.
So, I mean, you guys keep coming back to the same old, let's go do what we've already done again. So we can certainly do that, but what I think I've heard, I haven't heard from Mike and Sam. How about you, Sam? You got anything you want to add to any of this?
So at this point, we're still retaining their deposits and we haven't taken any of their balance out of their deposits.
I don't think that's.
In
They don't have, some of them don't have the.
most cases, their deposit doesn't exist. Either because they've been long-term customers before deposit requirement in the case of solid waste only, or it's likely been already applied. And I know the staff has been working to reach out for those folks, but I have not followed up on what the status is and they've been able to make contact.
I think from what Sonia's suggesting and what you are already attempting to do is to reach out and start a payment plan, even though some have failed to start that. But until we change the ordinance, we're just going to have to keep on notifying them and.
Well, it's not the ordinance that needs to, so I might confuse things. So we were discussing an ordinance change relating to the timelines, the billing cycles, and the how it would affect when shut-off notices are given.
But also.
In this case, we have a lot of significantly delinquent account, months and months delinquent, that would not be affected by an ordinance change. If we were in the case of whether they would be told they're shut off right away or not, and the timelines associated with it. What I need is to go forward and to pursue shut-offs is lifting of the mayor's emergency declaration and guidance from council on what they would like to see in terms of timelines. I can follow the existing timelines as they exist in ordinance, and there's not an issue with doing that. We could start that next week. I was just pointing out that we had discussed changing some of those timelines as part of previous discussions, and whether or not you want to go with the old or the new or whatever. If there's a clear motion and vote, then I think I probably have the guidance that I need to go on and pursue, subject to the lifting of the declaration, the shut-offs of the delinquent accounts.
So what kind of time frame would you put on it?
Go ahead, Lisa.
What kind of time frame, Jared, would you put on it? I'm kind of following what Sonia was talking about, you know, after we have a transition, you know, what would be a reasonable and along with that would fall in line with our billing cycle? You know, June 1, June 8th, June 9th, something like that.
So
What's
we
your
have
recommendation.
bills coming due this Friday. We'll have an assessment at that time of delinquent accounts by that Monday or Tuesday. We could have the notices sent, probably Thursday is the soonest that we could send those notices. Likely it would be Monday the 19th that those notices would be sent. The next bill that would be due is the May 9th. I have to, when will the bill go out in April? Bills go out on the 15th. Okay, so that's right. So we would have, what we'd likely try to do is scramble and have those notices sent with the regular billing. That way everything's on the same cycle and not to confuse this date, that date, and everything else.
Yeah,
So we
agreed.
provided notice on April 15th, that billing that goes out. Come May 9th, if you're still delinquent and you've received a notice, that 10th, we're going to start processing you for shutoffs with the Martindale Water Supply Corporation and Texas Disposal Systems.
Yeah, I think that's a fair timeline. What is that? What does everybody else think?
You do that fast? You think?
We'll just have people stay late.
Welcome to the new mayor's job.
Yeah, right.
So that means that if we rescind the order on 4 and 30, then that all fits together, right?
Yeah.
Do you think
It would be cleaner if we rescinded the order on the 15th when the billing is done. That way there's no confusion potentially that, hey, we have an existing order that says I'm not going to get shut off, if they're aware of it. And
But that's fine. I just need a date.
Can that order be rescinded? Can that order be rescinded by the mayor without council?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm saying keep it as clean as possible.
Mike, you haven't weighed in on any of this yet. What say you? Anything?
Yeah, it looks like Jared's got it down pretty good. It is an extremely complicated issue. These a lot of poor people. This COVID's been devastating, and I agree with Sonia and Lisa on that. I'd say we need to like to give them adequate time and try to work with them to a point that it's an extremely complicated issue. So,
hopefully people are going to be receiving their checks, and so they'll have
exactly.
some money on hand to pay their bill.
And Jared, that was an excellent suggestion you made. Get it with the bill so that way they're aware of it. That's a really good suggestion. So,
all right.
And this is a good way for a city to empower their citizens, like to take, a situation and, empower themselves by finding and seeking, avenues to help them take care of it. Like here, it's not like you're just gonna shut it off and you're gonna say, here's X, Y, Z, here's this organization. This is what you could do to, help you out. So they're not that far in the rears, as y'all were saying.
Yeah.
So do you think that the buildup of these accounts to be delinquent for such a long period of time, is that due to the restrictions of turning off utilities due to COVID? Or is there anything internal with the city about the absence of a utility clerk or efficient city infrastructure to send out these notices on appropriate timeframes?
It's a little both. We have experienced significant turnover in our utility clerk position. I've had some difficulties in getting folks trained up and having confidence in our billing. Part of it's also stop go signals from myself and making sure we're clear on what we're doing as a city staff going forward. Lifting this order and having city council input on that provides clarity for me and the staff of what we need to do to proceed. Like most of the delinquent accounts, well, of those that I know we have talked to, some of that have the ones that we had one account we talked about previously that we took action on, as the city council took action on. The other accounts where we had payment plans in place, that they were significantly delayed and on the order of like 6 months we're closing in on. And some of it was directly COVID related. Some of it was, just because they're from a low income household and they struggle in some degree. So I'm hopeful that these new federal programs are going to provide some assistance to them when that comes around, once they get square. It's all of it combined created this situation that if we're able to snap a chalk line, as they say, and from here moving out, we have this direction and we're going forward with this clarity of focus, I have no doubt that we'll be able to make it happen.
Do we have a utility clerk, or is Carmen still filling in?
We have one utility clerk and we have Carmen filling in. We have another individual who's received an offer letter that we're anxiously waiting to hear back from, but all signs indicate that we'll be good there. And we're hopeful that next hire, if it comes to fruition, will also provide some what's the experience? I forget the they would be able to fill in other positions within the city if we experience additional vacancies. Contingency planning or what have you. We're also hoping
Hey,
to get our
Jared,
go ahead.
I have something that just crossed my mind, and when we're talking, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit, but when we're talking about looking at the ordinance and such, and also being, customer oriented, we've spent a lot of time and energy talking about people who have had struggles paying their bills. And at the same time, we have a lot of people who have it on, automatic auto pay, and it just happens and doesn't ever think. And so I do know also that our physical mailing as our U.S. Postal Service stamps or postage continues to go up. I'd be curious if it's ever possible through our website or what. There's a lot of companies out there that you can opt out of the paper, basically go paperless. And I'd like when we look at the ordinance stuff, I'd like to know if that's an option going forward with the kind of website that we do have.
Yeah, one of the previous discussion items were related to those things. I can include paperless billing as something to look into as well as we discuss that.
That could be a significant savings, even if whether we give the customer the 50-cent break that we're not spending or not, but either way, if we had even 25% of our
We're a little off track here, Lisa. Let's go get back onto the agenda. So we have a plan. I think we got your things, and what I've heard is that we have no pushback from the council on ceasing the order of not removing the order of the utility cutoffs, not doing utility cutoffs by 4/15 is everybody's buying into that. And we'll go make that happen. And Jared, you got the ball on the ordinance changes and making the
So yeah, the ordinance changes we'll handle as a separate issue. I think we have clear guidance from council on this one on the path forward.
All right. The other discussion item was on zoning regulations. I guess this is a continuation of our Saturday marathon.
Yeah, that's what this is. So one of the items we did not get a chance to get to was the regulations regarding, there we go. I want to move folks off the screen so I can see this okay. Regulations regarding campgrounds and RV parks, it's been in the background, it's swirled in our conversations. I wanted to, while it's still somewhat fresh, go back to that conversation so I can put a pin in it and know how to proceed from there. And with this, what I want this discussion to be focused on is not necessarily, well, we'll get to some of the wheres when it relates to flood damage prevention. But think more broadly, not just down near the river, but also in commercial spaces or anywhere within the city. If there was to be a campground, what would the design standard be? And what I have set up here is to go from campground design standard and build on that where changes may be necessary or desired regarding RV parks. And so I would like to go through this line by line or issue by issue to get some guidance from council on how we want to craft this, and that way I can go back and make this update along with the others that I have cooking. Any questions on that before we get into it? Okay.
Well, wouldn't it be better to know first in terms of zoning or locations that we would have to know that first to know the variables involved in the parameters of construction of a.
Glad you asked that question. I'm glad you asked that question. So, my hope is that everywhere that we can as a city, limit policy by exception, because it creates a lot of efficiencies for city staff. So every time that someone wants to build a fence in the scenic corridor, we're spending money on advertisements, we're processing applications, we're spending time in city council meetings. That might be the appropriate thing. That was obviously the direction of the city selected leaders when that was put in place. But there's an opportunity, especially when it gets to building and zoning, where we can provide clear guidance and regulations that say this is permissible, this is not, without having to go through an exception process, would be greatly beneficial for the Planning and Zoning Committee, Commission, and Lisa and myself or the mayor, as we engage with interested developers or people who have business ideas. If we can say, here's the black and white, what if you want to do this, here's what you got to do. Instead of saying a campground, you need to come to us, submit a proposal, and we'll have a beauty contest to whether that's a good idea or not. Less beauty contests we have, and less subjectivity we have in that process, less policy by exception, the more efficient I think we can be when it comes to these issues. So as it relates to your question about where, does where affect how a campground will operate? I think with the exception of floodplain management and flood damage prevention, elsewhere in the city, the where should not have an input on what the design standard should be. It should meet a minimum standard for any location. If there's additional regulations that we want to, go above the minimum, and you want to say, if you're located on Highway 80, then you shall have a dual entrance or something like that to your business or property or what have you, then that's something that we could go from above the minimum. But as much as we can clarify and put into our regulations now, the easier it is to enforce later on.
Jared,
That's a
quick
long
question.
answer, but go ahead.
Jared, quick question, Jared. So I guess you're saying you did the definition, so these issues about floodway could be addressed in the zoning maps per se?
It can be addressed in the zoning maps. It's also as a minimum design standard. If you're located when we start getting to the wheres and playing with the zoning map, if a decision was made that it could be permissible under certain conditions to have a campground in a flood zone or floodway, then that condition would need to be stated here. And so
Stated
leaving
here
the
in this-
possibility
in this
that it could be next to the river or on the other side of Highway 80 and it could be anywhere.
let
We
me-
haven't had those mapping discussions. I try to address it. And if we want to, we can go to that issue first. I think that's, because it's a high concern, I know.
Can you clarify? So you're talking about the definitions here about a campground, and then so basically you couldn't say in a camp, well, I have no problem with campgrounds, but I'm saying if you said something, the campground cannot be developed in a floodway.
Yeah, you could say that as just a period, full stop, no exceptions.
Okay.
Definitely. Or
and I assume we'd say based on the 2015 flood maps. That's what we're currently.
It would be in accordance with our flood damage prevention ordinance, which references the most recent FEMA flood map, which is December 2020.
Okay, so that'd be the 2000 floodplain maps. Okay, as long as it's, like I said before, repeating myself, I had no problem with Summer Breeze. I had no problem with anything about a campground, but as long as it's specified, it cannot be done in a floodway.
That is correct, Mike. And clarifying it in the specific location as we may be adding this RV park and campground section to our ordinances, creating a standard that is easy to understand and follow. But currently the way that it is that, there's development standards and you can't build in a floodway anyway, no matter what it is you're building. So it takes a little bit of following the yellow brick road to get to that statement, but it is already there. However, I think putting it here, making it clear in this particular way is certainly good.
And also that would be good.
What Lisa said was not exactly true.
Yeah.
Really?
You can build in a floodway provided you got a professional engineer signing off that it does not impede the water flow upstream, downstream, or whatever. That's how Mike got a dock below his house, right?
Well, it also says that they
wait a minute.
adequate notice of evacuation.
So yeah, let's level set here.
Let's back up.
Yeah.
So in flood damage prevention ordinance, it has specific regulations regarding building within the floodway and flood zone. For this revision, it's an issue that we haven't had a chance to discuss. As a starting point, I used language in here starting on line 2080, item H, for those who have the zoning regulation up, or you can see the screen. My suggestion, or at least to get the conversation started, I think we have some positions that are no way in the floodway, or some that, well, maybe so, if so-and-so or such and such exists. So as a starting point, let's work with the text and then modify it. So as I put here as a suggestion for consideration, is that all spaces in a campground shall be located on sites with elevations that are not susceptible to flooding, unless the campground receives approval for the floodplain administrator and the city council based on application submitted by the property owner. The application for approval of a campground within the floodplain or floodway shall include a plan to monitor flood forecasts and conditions, effectuate an orderly evacuation of inhabitants, and limit damage to property and the environment in case of a flood. All development must comply with the flood damage prevention ordinance.
I think we need to put FEMA in there. FEMA requirements in a floodway. Hey, but Ken, I have a question for you, sir. Ken.
Sure.
Say for example, we say we condoned, or we said, hey, you can have a RV camp or a campground, and then a flood comes and somebody dies. There's a fatality. Okay. And they say, hey, you did not follow the FEMA requirements for developing a floodway. Specifically in the permit, it says you have to have a proper evacuation plan in a flood prone area like we have. Could they come back on us and say, hey, you didn't follow FEMA requirements.
Could they come back and say it? Yes. In the world of lawsuits, anyone can say anything at any time. But I mean, it's incumbent on the city to, one, set very strict and rigid requirements for development that meet with the expectations of the restrictions put in place by the federal government, and follow those. And then ultimately, if that happens and someone complains, then you've got to trust the process and follow it. And like we had with a recent scenario here, kick it onto the intergovernmental risk pool and move on down the road, because that's the process at hand. But it's just a matter of dotting I's and crossing T's as best you can. And even if you do things right every time, that doesn't mean that someone isn't someday going to come forward and complain and try and hold you responsible.
But I'm saying, as an attorney, you agree with me, if we had, say, follow our floodplain, our flood damage prevention ordinance, and then somebody dies and say, hey, you didn't follow the FEMA requirements. I mean, that would be a way for an attorney to come in and say, hey, you did not follow it. You did not have adequate time. You didn't have to have an alarm system, blah, blah, blah. I still say we need to put that in there about we have to follow FEMA restrictions and developing in a flood. And this is maybe not the wrong time to bring this up, but especially in our park land, I think we need to have a separate zoning for parks. And that is strictly enforced because that is buyout land from FEMA. And we have to follow those guidelines specifically. So that's maybe another issue we can talk about, but I think there needs to be another category for that P for parks. Our city parks are I mean, they're off limits. Now, private property, we can probably discuss things like that, but our private property, our city parks are not, you can't touch them because they were given to us by FEMA. So I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, noted. So as far as a specific recommendation regarding the proposed language, you would add a statement. Basically, all development must comply with flood damage prevention ordinance and FEMA regulations.
Something along that line. We could.
Okay. We'd have to go look those up.
I can look.
I like Jared's statement that said, let's go put one in there that says, campgrounds are not allowed in floodways.
I think that would be the best thing because
That removes the
everything-
question and all of this.
everything that I'm hearing, it's all subjective, and it's subjective to, as you stated at the beginning, like, it's basically a beauty contest. And, say if the property is not in the floodplain, but yet down there it was, they could have the dwelling where it's not in the floodplain and have the campground down where it is. There's always loopholes. Everybody, like if you ask everybody on the council right now, do they want to see campgrounds in the floodplain? They're going to say no, probably.
Sonia,
So
I'm
I would
talking
say,
floodway.
yeah.
Hey, Sonia, I'm not talking floodplain. I'm talking floodway.
Floodway.
Floodway. It's a big difference.
Yeah, so the difference on that is in the floodway, it's I forget the percentage that they use, but you will go under, this land will go underwater if there is a flood.
Right.
In the flood zone or floodplain, this will go underwater most likely 1% of the time.
Correct.
So I think that if I understand Councilmember Clabb, he's saying that the 1% of the time that might be acceptable. If it's in the floodway, it's a definite no.
Exactly, sir.
Okay.
On your statement B, though, it says with elevations that are not susceptible to flooding. Well, if it's not susceptible to flooding, why would you need approval from an administrator or the city council?
So that's setting up that if all spaces shall be located on sites with elevations that are not susceptible to flooding. But if they have sites that are susceptible to flooding, that's only allowed if they receive approval under this proposed language. What I hear here now is regarding we can clarify that susceptible to flooding to the floodway and say elevations that are within the floodway are not allowed.
Period.
We would still need to address the floodplain or that 1% flood zone.
Yeah, because that
That's a
first sentence is confusing because you're saying that if it's not susceptible to flooding unless the campground in a floodway, see, you've got it in that same sentence, but it's not, it shouldn't be in the same sentence because you would think that that second part of the sentence is relating to land that is not susceptible.
Here we go.
And also, Jared, should we clarify like the 100-year floodplain? I mean, that needs to be clarified too, the 100-year or whatever.
It's I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, it's defined as the floodplain, the floodway, and in a very simplistic, term, in a very simplistic way, when I've talked to potential developers, based on not just our ordinance, but also with FEMA regulations, is that, no physical or permanent structures can be built in the floodway unless they're able to be built, where they would not flood. And that becomes cost prohibitive. And so I like the fact that we're talking about, let's just eliminate that right out of the gate. But to keep things simple, you can add in the 100-year, the 500-year, the whatever. But the bottom line is it's referred to as a floodplain or the floodway. Floodway means it will flood, period. Floodplain, it might not. It might.
Jared, can I make another suggestion to simplify?
Real quick. So I don't know if everybody can see the screen, but the change edit is no camp spaces shall be located on sites with elevations that are within the floodway. Is that reflective of the conversation?
It is.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
To make it simple, can we say no spaces shall be located on sites that are within the floodway?
That's what it says.
It says elevations. Just eliminate elevations.
So the distinction there would be that they would, if you're right close to the base flood elevation, you would not be able to raise that elevation above the floodway.
So we're talking about somebody could haul a bunch of fill material, put stilts up or whatever.
What's on the map?
Well, see, that opens up a can of worms right there. I think that needs to be eliminated. That elevate.
Well,
it needs to be specifically no spaces shall be located on sites that are within the floodway.
Well, or also we'd want to include though no spaces or associated infrastructure, because you've mentioned bathrooms, caretaker's cottage.
Yes.
We do not want any of those items in the floodway either. So it's not just the camping sites that we're talking about. We're talking about the associated infrastructure of the necessity of a campground. Even Spencer's Campground has got bathrooms and a kitchen. And as Jared has mentioned, those would be requirements for a campground. So I think we should say, and the associated structures or infrastructure associated with the campground. Because that's a whole component of the campground too, where we're not just going to have people throw down tents on the ground and poop in the woods,
So then I'm going to ask a couple of questions just for conversation purposes. So we've got a developer who has acquired a piece of property, and a portion of the property is in the floodplain and a portion of the property is in the floodway. And so then the question that I could imagine I would hear from a developer would be, well, what can I do in the floodway?
Very limited.
Right there.
Could I interject something real quick? So
Yeah.
whenever we're doing our parks and we want to build a restroom, we're not gonna be able to build a restroom or add tables or do any of that?
It would have to be done in accordance with the flood damage prevention ordinance. So, and it would be based on the base flood elevation,
This is specific to campsites, not the parks.
Gotcha.
yeah, the campgrounds.
Campgrounds, excuse me,
Mhm.
not the parks. So I
Gotcha.
don't think you get into that,
Okay.
but it would be, we ought to follow our own rules, I would think.
Yeah.
You know, we ought to follow our own guidelines, and yes, I agree with where you were heading with
Mhm.
that. You know, we shouldn't build bathrooms in floodway.
No, we shouldn't. I'm just saying that we
Yeah, we
need to,
should.
we're setting a precedence by doing this. We're kind of setting ourselves up as a city also for saying what we want in our parks. Like we're saying, we don't want, you know. So you're following me.
Yeah, I mean,
Alright,
okay, let's go back. I still say that the terminology elevation should be eliminated, because then somebody could elevate it on poles, or they could elevate it, put a big old dirt mound or something up there.
Hey, Mike,
That-
listen.
that needs- let me finish. Lisa, please let me finish. Lisa, please let me finish, please. I just think it would simplify it and eliminate it, and that way it would be fair to the developer or whoever the landowner, just to say, hey, it's within the floodway, period. It's a simple, straightforward statement. Easy to understand.
You are right, Mike. You are right on that point. I just want to clarify something. That information, when developing is happening, that information comes from previous development. So those quote elevations are already established. It would not fall into the situation of you get an approval. Oh, wait, let me go move some dirt so I can get it approved. No, the elevations are already set on the map. I just wanted to clarify that with you. I understand what you're saying and I agree, but I just want to clarify that.
I agree with you, Lisa. That just kind of leaves interpretation out. And also get back, Son, you made a point with like tables. You could probably, we could talk about that later on, but you could probably have tables, and higher ground. I don't know. That's something that could be considered, like picnic tables. A lot of times they're attached to the ground, you know.
Wait, so
they won't float
But
away.
you can't have picnic tables in the floodway.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing, just to keep it simplified. I agree, Sam. Have them in the floodplain.
So no spaces, structures, or amenities shall be located within the floodway, period.
Yes, I agree with that.
Campsites, the rest. All right, when it comes time to the floodplain, that would anything built within the floodplain would have to follow the flood damage prevention ordinance, which is captured in kind of this hanging Chad last sentence I have here from the previous. What process, if any, would city council want regarding campgrounds that might be located in the floodplain if they wanted to build? Is it simply follow the flood damage prevention ordinance and that's fine? That would be the cleanest, that'd be the easiest.
Yeah, and so here's what happens. So say we get, a developer is going to do this. So it's going to go through the same permitting process. It's also going to be reviewed by our city engineer. Those types of plans and elevations would be submitted by the developer's engineer. That's the process.
Okay, yep, that makes sense. Would the city council, so I'm gonna just kind of label these real quick. This is green.
On that specifically, we rely on our city engineer to make a recommendation. And so based on his, his stamp, his rubber stamp, if you will, he recommends that the council would either approve or approve with conditions, whatever the development plans were, as presented.
I believe that process exists in the subdivision ordinance. I don't believe that process exists within the flood damage prevention. The flood damage prevention ordinance sets the requirement on basically the builder's engineer and have that reviewed through an inspection or building inspector plan reviewer. I don't think currently does Steve, our engineer, review residential buildings? He only reviews a subdivision.
Right. Bureau Veritas is one that looked at.
Yeah. So Bureau Veritas would look at those plans and evaluate them according to the flood damage prevention ordinance.
If in fact we receive a permit application and the property is in the floodplain or the floodway, Bureau Veritas definitely better be evaluating it and determining based on that.
Right, but the distinction there is it's not our city engineer. It would be they'd be
Sure.
Bureau
Yeah.
Veritas.
Call it what,
So
yeah, call it whatever you like.
the remaining language that I had might be superfluous. It could be something that we just delete. I think there might be merit in it from previous conversations that councils had regarding evacuation plans. And so if a campground was in the floodplain, would city council want to add any additional requirements beyond the flood damage prevention ordinance for the operation of a campground within a floodplain area?
Well, how are you gonna start that sentence now? Unless the campground, what's?
I'm breaking this all up, right? So here we can move
What we want in and what we
part. Here's a part.
Yeah.
I'm getting to this sentence of whether there needs to be an application process for further evaluation regarding evacuation, limiting damage, and monitoring flood forecast conditions on the operator of that campground.
I think this is one of those situations where we really need to look at our sister cities that are on this river and other rivers and how they handle that. New Braunfels, Wimberley. I would like to see what kind of requirements. I mean, I'm all on board with creating some type of exit strategy and plan, but there's a lot of details involved with that, and I don't think that this council or the next wants to create that from scratch. So I'd like to see what's coming from other cities.
That's a
What's
good point.
different about campgrounds than other businesses? Like,
What's that?
the cafe down here, it's just a business, it's in the flood plain. It's not in the
Well, there's a difference
floodway.
between business and people
We don't
sleep.
ask them to put together a evacuation plan.
Nobody's sleeping there.
That's the difference is that there's potentially people asleep in that.
We get a rainstorm up, might not hit Martindale too hard, but it might have hit somewhere else up river pretty hard. And now you have the Blanco River getting too full and spilling over its edges and sweeping down over town.
I like that sentence in yellow. Seems to have it all there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
We also need
Different thing, the people are potentially asleep when all of this is going on and they don't have the normal, they wouldn't have 911 ringing on their phones like everybody does or.
Yeah, so what this would do the application for the approval of the campground would have to have a plan. Basically what it sets up is a requirement for monitoring. One of the other items we can get to is whether they need to have an on-site camp host or campground host. And that person would be likely, in the way that someone would structure this, is that campground host would be responsible for the people staying on their campground and their health and welfare, including monitoring flood forecasting conditions and effectuating a evacuation of inhabitants of that campground.
And I can see that based on a certain number of sites, you know, from a business perspective, if you've got, you know, more than 10 sites, I feel like something like that would certainly be prudent. The other thing that making sure that we're clear in this whole situation is because there are people, and I've talked to developers before, that are not from this area. You know, there's a difference between the kind of flooding that we have here versus other places where the water just rises. You know, here it rushes. It's very, very different, even though you still get, you know, a lot of feet of water. And so the danger is different. Making it clear so that people who don't understand the kind of flooding that we have is important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lisa. Good point.
I forget what it is, but I think there is the flood gauges on the Blanco River, I think in Blanco or Wimberley, and then it has them down San Marcos and then south of here. There are, I think, based on flow, they can project if there's a surge coming upriver, how much time until it reaches here. And if there's a rain event or rain in the forecast, if I were reviewing this, I would want to see that they're reviewing daily forecasts or posting daily forecasts for the campground at an information board or something. And if there's rain in the forecast, they understand its severity and they have a plan to monitor those flood gauges for an advance warning.
I think also like with that, I like how it's written, but I think that I would also like somehow to incorporate Hector Rangel looking at it and him being in the loop since he is, you know, the emergency management coordinator, that, you know, he has to give input on it as well.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Jared, one other point, you know, sometimes those gauges fail, they go out, just to let you know.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they do. So.
Our police department and our fire department, you know, they receive notifications. They rely on certain, and I don't know, you know, what either the websites are or the phone numbers that they, you know, call into, but that's something we need to ask Chief. You know, that he gets that kind of information, and I'm sure it comes through through Hector or whoever's in that position at the time. But there's some standard places that information comes down the pike. No pun intended.
Yeah, it's come a long way in the last 20 years with these gauges. You can go online and check the gauges in real time. The old days, we used to call our neighbors upstream, say, "Hey, is it up to the second tree yet?" or something like that.
Yeah.
In the house. Okay, it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, like with this, like McLeod just asked the attorney, like, what could a city be held liable? Like by us requiring these emergency, you know, plans and saying, okay, in our ordinance, it's okay for you to have it. We're saying as a city, it's okay to have it. You know, that's just like the unfortunate thing that happened to the couple in Wimberley and the children, you know, the family that passed away, you know, the husband and wife here. I mean, this is definitely real. So what I'm hearing here as a council is we're saying it's okay to, you know, to do that as long as we have these things in place, which it sounds like the city is willing to take some responsibility for allowing this.
There is some risk, yes.
Mm-hmm.
To eliminate that risk would be to change this first sentence. No structure, spaces, amenities be located within the floodway and floodplain.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you eliminate the risk, but you're pushing yourself further and further away from that risk. I mean, just because you're not on the FEMA flood map doesn't mean that spot of land is not going to flood when next storm hits, but you're reducing the risk as you go along. Mm-hmm. The tricky thing is a lot of the city is in a floodplain.
You're right,
so
Jared.
You're and there's not a lot of uses or a lot of developers interested in pursuing locations with floodplains because of, if you're going to do a built structure to manage your business, and there's money involved, it's cost, because you have to raise it up, you have to go through all the engineering assessments. For housing, it's definitely, it oftentimes cost prohibitive. For businesses, that was the issue of why that RV park did not,
Yeah.
one of the main issues. So for this, if the city has a lot of vacant land and we restrict essentially all uses or potential uses, I'm exaggerating some by using the word all, we run the risk of not having a lot of viable land within the city limits that is being used towards its most economic potential. By allowing a campground in a floodplain, you are allowing economic potential to take place on a less desired place of land, and benefit from it. But you're right, you're taking a risk by doing so.
And that could mean, like we were saying, like a beauty contest. That could mean a campground with tubes involved.
Well, we don't allow.
Or the
Assuming
floaties in the river, shall I say?
So a commercial business could be established within the city for commercial, tubing outfitters. However, they have to be located within a commercial district, and all the commercial districts are along Highway 80. So it kind of gets to the place of it, how we want to structure a campground. If the campground wants to sponsor, adventures, tubing adventures, river adventures as part of their package, that we want to probably address that in these regulations, or whether that's an allowed thing, or everything has to be located on site, or that portion of their business then require it to be located only within the commercial zone.
But that's like when you were going to say that's like a beauty contest, that's.
Well, that would, if we say, if you're a campground and you're going to have off-site activities that include recreation on the river or other waterways, you must be located in the commercial district. You're putting it same on that, at that point of regulating a campground the same way you would a tubing outfitting business.
Well, I mean, isn't almost 100% of our FEMA buyout floodway lands in the parkway in the floodway? I can only think of a small portion of our land.
Campgrounds, this is commercial campgrounds. These aren't park city-run campgrounds, which is something that I think the city could really pursue, be controversial, but it's a way for the revenue generator for the city potentially.
But I'm saying all the land is in the floodway. We don't have much, very small percentage of our parkway land is in the floodplain. It's all in the floodway. I think
This has
Guardiola.
nothing to do with parkland.
Well, I'm just saying that the location, we're distinguishing between floodplain and floodway. So if we say that we're allowing it in the floodplain, then yes, that would rule out all the parkland that's in the floodway automatically.
Parkland is
I'm not understanding the reference to the parkland.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay, no, I'm just saying because
This has to do with somebody owning some land, not the city, and turning it into a campground.
okay, so we're saying that we're acknowledging that all of the land of the parkway is in the floodway of the park.
We're not talking the parks.
Okay.
We're talking about a businessman or woman, Jeff and Susan, want to come to Martindale, and there's a plot of land that they want to buy, and they want to turn it into a campground. What we're doing is saying, here are the regulations. If you want to do that, here are the regulations you must follow. If one of the ones we're discussing now is if a portion of that land is located within the floodway, no spaces, structures, amenities are allowed.
Period.
Period. The discussion we're having now is what do you do about things that are within the 100-year floodplain? would spaces, structures, amenities also be allowed? And then along with that, we're talking, got down a little bit of a rabbit hole of ancillary business ventures that the campground could pursue. But as it relates to the development of that land, would it be allowed within the floodplain? Would there be any restrictions other than the flood damage prevention ordinance? I think the risk is there, to Councilmember Villalova's point, that there is a risk if you're going to allow it in the floodplain. To help manage that risk, you can create an application process where we go through a review. I think it's a good point to have the emergency management coordinator be part of that. And whether we want to have that process exist as a risk mitigation, we can, you can take no risk, avoid the risk by not having anything in the floodplain, accept the risk and just say, follow the flood damage prevention ordinance, and after that, whatever. Or we can try to mitigate it or control it or address it through an application review process that identifies evacuation requirements or limit damage to property. So like bolting down the picnic tables or something like that. Those are the sort of things we're thinking of.
I see the distinction.
With us, eliminating in the floodway. However, if we get into eliminating anything in the floodplain, we might as well just close shop. So
yeah, because there's not a lot here.
Yeah, and then the other thing I was going to say a moment ago, when it was conversation about tubing and what have you, I'm thinking about if I were to go to an RV park, that has a manager's, an office and a little retail area and such, for a definition purpose. Say, for example, if that retail space, they sell hats and sunglasses and drinks and snacks, they maybe sell tubes as well. Now, if they sell tubes and their guests as individuals then go to the river on their own and partake in that kind of way, that to me does not constitute as a tubing business. A tubing business, we would, I think we have it, or if we don't, maybe we should have it defined, which has to do with, transportation of large busload of people and transport, pick up and drop off and all that sort of stuff. So I just want to make sure
defined.
we do have that defined, right? And so I can't even wrap my mind around a tubing business being involved in an RV park, but
it would basically, they would have to have their own, it'd be a business within a business is how it likely would be structured. So I pulled up, for everyone's benefit, the 2020 flood map. The dark grayish purple color you see is the floodway. The blue is the 100-year floodplain, and this orangey, I don't know, taupe color is the 500-year floodplain, which often it really doesn't come into play, but I guess it could.
And the
So
white is fine. The white is fine. No
white is not this designated as any of those three things.
Oh, yeah.
it's referred
So
to.
it's all, and it stops at the river. So this is just Martindale,
County side, yeah.
Caldwell County side of the map. So what you can see here is, up here, you can see the Skyview subdivision portions of the Hobson Ranch and Highway 80 all the way down, and then you get down here near the bottom is West Ridge. With the exception of north of Highway 80, between 142 and Skyview, most of the cities are within the floodplain.
That's
And
correct.
so that was a point I was making of if you're going to restrict them from not operating within a floodplain, you're
That's
you're
not an
putting them in a position where they're only in that defined space between 142 and Skyview, which is probably our most prime commercial real estate. We might not want to do that because the economic output of a campground versus a business is probably other business forms is probably quite different.
Well, there's a little bit of white between all that blue, closer in towards the river. I mean, it's not just all along 80 and Skyview. There's that big portion between the floodplain.
That's Jack Mudd's property, I believe, is what that is. He lucked out. He got a good piece, I guess. That's a joke. But yeah, so this is where when we're looking at zoning and land use issues, where's the campground going to be economically viable? If you're going to have to create, I think for it to be economically viable, you have to allow it within a floodplain. If you're going to allow it in the floodplain, how much risk management do we want to put into our ordinance? Is it just follow the flood damage prevention and make sure your buildings are above the base flood elevation and you're off and good? Or do we want to have some sort of emergency coordination process with an on-site camp host? Or I structured it to have an on-site camp host. I think with the vision that these campsites would be larger commercial establishments, not just, a place with five tent sites popped up along the side of Highway 80. Maybe that's my poor assumption on my part, but I agree with that. I want to pause. Any questions on this? Or I'm going to start going around the table if I can to get some direction up and down whether we want, no floodplain, some floodplain, or wide open floodplain. Little risk, some risk, more risk. I don't know if it's a lot, but little some more. Mike, I think you're the most interested, vocal about this issue. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I agree with you. Floodplain, it had to be somewhat flexible in the floodplain. If you had, strict requirements like evacuation plans or whatever, I do agree with you. A lot of our city is in the floodplain. So as long as we stay away from that floodway, I think that's the most critical point.
In terms of regulations in a floodplain, limit it to just the flood damage prevention ordinance as it exists. I'd place additional requirements on the developer. Where do you fall on those two?
I think we need to do some additional requirements like evacuation plans to protect the city and to protect lives, but yeah, just have a little more stringent, but not to totally shut it down. It's in the floodplain.
Okay. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
They're definitely don't shut it down within the floodplain. Following the guidelines that we already have in place. When it comes to an emergency evacuation plan, that's the part I was talking about earlier. We need to see what other cities have deemed as an acceptable evacuation plan. That we don't need to just say that's what you need without having that defined. So I feel like that needs to be included if we are going to require it.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And then and I like, and I don't know what the magic number is, but I personally would want to see, be it RV parks and or campgrounds, in a higher quality type of or an upper end type of establishment. And you tend to see those when you do have someone who is on site 24/7. In campgrounds where there is not anyone on site, that's where things have the propensity to get unruly. Unless you're in a national forest or something like that, and then you still have, regulations to follow. So if in fact we determine, based on number of sites, that a camp, RV manager or whatever they may be called, somebody on site. I don't, like I said, I don't know what that number is, whether it's 10 sites or if you've got more than 20 sites. I mean, to me, if you've got 20 sites, you definitely need to have somebody on site.
It would also depend on how big the property is.
Agreed. However, I don't care whether you've got, 10 acres and you've got one site on each acre, or you have, 10 acres and you only have two. To me, if you have more than, that's, to me, that's worth discussion as far as what the number would be that we might, require.
Okay.
And when you, from a business perspective, when you have a requirement that if you're going to put in an RV park and you're going to have 20 sites, and you, based on our ordinance, you have to have someone who is an on-site manager, you're going to have a higher end establishment. And, I personally like that. You eliminate a lot of riffraff when you have that.
Okay. Jan, any comments on management of campgrounds within floodplain?
Well, a lot depends on what is in the flood damage prevention ordinance. I was kind of reviewing some of that, and some of that is, we got to update that one too, because they're still referring to maps of, for 2012 FEMA maps.
I think we updated, but we just
We
haven't
did it, it's just not uploaded from American Legal yet. We sent that off.
So we did fix that? I just want to make
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
I think we fixed it across the board.
Yes. Okay. Well, I just need to review the flood damage prevention. I'd hate to kind of like.
Oh, this isn't the first. This is going to be the last time we're talking about this issue. I'm just trying to get
Oh,
clarity
okay.
as I work to
Good.
package the comments and input into a final review. Will be this, a zoning ordinance revision is a months, if not a year-long process.
Yes.
So.
Yes, I'm okay with the restrictions. But sometimes are we talking specifically RV right now, not campground?
We're talking specifically campgrounds. That RV.
Well, sometimes with campgrounds, there is a little bit more or less restrictions.
Right. So
people go there mainly for primitive camping anyway.
One of the things that we have in the rest of the ordinance we haven't got to yet is the requirements are such that it's not a primitive camping. There's restrooms.
So no tents allowed. So then
it's tents, but it's on likely developed pad sites, and has running potable water on the site in the campground. There's restroom facilities, and I
can't
believe
build a campfire or anything.
Yep, campfire ring.
There will be a campfire ring.
We haven't got to that part yet.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the general sense is if when we get to, we might not have time for it tonight.
Well,
when we
all
go
I'm
through
saying
the rest
is
of the ordinance it's more than just a fresh plot of grass to go and put your tent down on. It's developed.
Yeah, when I want to go to a campground, I don't want to go somewhere where it is all real high end. No, I want to let my hair down. And, that's just, I guess I shouldn't say
We'll
me.
see you in the national forest then.
Usually campgrounds are a little bit more informal than your RV parks. Anyway.
That's true.
Okay. Go ahead.
Is anything else, Sam, before we take it into the room?
No.
So I think that's why there's always tends to be a lot of confusion because there's such a melting pot of different ideas and visions of different council members. And I believe that before we had a property owner that wanted to do this and we straight up told her no.
I'm aware that there's been proposals for campgrounds in the past. I'm not sure about the specifics of it.
So there was a lady that came in, Hispanic woman that came in who wanted to do some campground in her property. And yes.
She wanted an RV thing.
And it was a hard no from us. So if we're changing, then that's good. But to me, this is a question that I have. I would like to see the risk on the developer. I do like the evacuation plans in coordination with our Martindale Fire, volunteer fire department, our police chief, and with Hector Rangel. That I agree with Jan that it's not all about high end. We shouldn't be saying it could only be high end. It should be who's going to be according to follow the guidelines that we have set. But I think if, we do, for one, we're not just saying we're only going to take this kind of campground. Also, I do think it is important on how the specifications of how many pads per, in the site are allowed, but I guess we would get deeper into that. And then this also opens up my question into, say if somebody already has an existing house, that's a house, that could be the campground. They have 5 acres and they say, oh, I want to open up my home to a campground. They already have their house there, so they necessarily would not have to do the building because they already live on site. All they would have to do is the gravel pads, add a restroom, have the water meter there, and boom, you have a campground, right?
Basically, that's where our zone, where the location of where it becomes allowed is important. Do we set up a separate, P for park, O for open spaces? Is it just commercial zone districts? That's when we get to the districting. Whether it would be allowed in R1 or maybe there was a, former house that exists and can be rebuilt.
So, yes, that's what I was saying. It can be a property owner that does have a home and property and does want to do a campsite according to the zoning.
Right.
But if it's mixed use, if it's business, commercial, if it's, they would be able to do that on their land if they chose to do so.
Yep.
And the use table, though, please.
Yeah. Sam.
I like the idea of a on-site person, probably in all cases, no matter how many campsites there are. You should have someone there, whether it be 1, 5, or 10. I think you included that in the caretaker's cottage for the campground. So I think in order to properly have an evacuation process in place and notification of a calamity, if it's coming down the river, you would expect to have someone on site to let the campers know. I like the distinction between the floodway and the floodplain, and not to allow it in the floodway, but the floodplain will be good for the restrictions that you have in that sentence. The one flood administrator, not the administrator, the one in yellow seems fine for the floodplain. Or an on-site. Well, we're not talking about an on-site manager. We're just talking about the general application at that.
At this point, it basically, I'd have to go back and we go through this line by line. It almost necessitates at least somebody being on call and monitoring the weather. I think we can specify whether it needs to have a camp host or not, on site or off site or what have you. We can, if it's camp host number posted and they live within the community, that might be acceptable. So we can address that going forward. So I think kind of doing the round robin, it sounds like floodplain's okay. We want to regulate it. We have some recommendations on who's a part of that approval process. We have some comments on going and finding out what that approval process is in other cities, what would be potentially considered an acceptable plan for something like this. And I think that gives me enough to work with. And I'll pause there. We might just call that a win. And I could go off and do this, or we could keep going through the rest of it. But I think this is a win. This is one of the sticking issues that we had from the start. And so I think this will help provide a lot of clarity. So I appreciate council for engaging in that conversation.
All right. That takes care of 9B for tonight. There's more to come, because you got RVs gonna need to say, that's probably got more people interested in campgrounds.
Well, and just be mindful that there are our quote RV parks that are RV parks / campgrounds. They have tent spaces available too. So I like the fact that we're making distinctions, but at the same time, they do have to be able to mesh together if in fact a developer wants that.
Yep.
Okay, that brings us to our future items / future meetings. As I said earlier, the election's on the 1st. That's a Saturday. So the 4th, 5 and 4 is our normal first Tuesday meeting of the month. However, if we have any, what do they call them? Provisional ballot that are voter registration issues, the state statutes say that the state has 6 days to help clear this up, which means that doing it on the 4th, if there's even one of those, we are forcing the issue. So the recommendation from Pam was, let's do this on the 11th, 5 and 11 being the next meeting.
Okay, so do we have a meeting? Do we have a meeting this month on the 20th?
No, we voted or decided last time that that's too close to the election. We can't do it in here. We can't Zoom because we're not in here with regular equipment.
Okay.
It was just, we either need to do it next week or just declare victory and go on, move to the next one.
Okay, that's fine. So
I'm suggesting that we schedule the next real meeting for 11 and 5. It would be a canvass of the election and turn over the gavel to the new council / mayor, and off we go.
wait, did you say 11 and 5?
5 and 11, May 11th.
May 11th. Okay. I got it.
Rob is just trying to extend his authority.
There you go.
Hey,
I thought he had a cosplay party for May the 4th be with you.
well, if he's wanting to party on May the 11th, he'll be joining me for my 39th birthday.
There you go. This is the 3rd time you've had the 39th birthday, right? All right.
You're not
everybody all right with that?
I may not be there that evening unless you guys really, really want to see me.
I think you could get a pass.
It's all right.
All right.
Do we need, if we're canvassing the votes, there's a issue? Would we want him?
Yeah, we kind of need him.
I think we might need him. So we might just cancel the 1st May and just go to the 3rd week of May, maybe?
No, we're not doing that.
What?
We can do the 12th.
They have to canvass within a certain.
Why can't we do that Monday?
We can do Monday.
Monday's
Monday.
Can we have it like maybe 30 minutes early, like 6 o'clock, so we can, well, no, never mind.
We've had meetings before where legal has been on call, and why do we have to have? Remind me to keep this about. Why do we have to have?
We should really have all that straightened out before the meeting.
Yeah, I think if he's on call, we need to stay consistent with our Tuesdays at 6:30.
It's his birthday.
He can be on call.
He doesn't want to be on the phone on his birthday?
Wait, you can't talk to us.
If you guys really need me to be there, I can figure something out.
Just
Aw.
No, do it Monday or Wednesday.
How often?
It's just another day.
How often do you turn 39 for the fourth time in a row? Yeah.
You know what? I can call for my birthday. You can be on call, Kent.
Whatever you guys decide.
He doesn't want to be on call.
Whatever
He
you.
wants to be off.
Oh, we don't need him. He really doesn't help us
We're not gonna
anyway.
need him.
Stay consistent. If you're going to move it to the 11th, if you're going to move it to the following week in order for everything to be canvassed properly, stay consistent with the Tuesday at 6:30, period.
All right. We've heard all that. I think we're gonna need to do it on the 11th. And it's,
Just whenever.
we'll work out what we need to with Kent. Maybe we'll have us, we call Mark Taylor back if we need him, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A substitute.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I guess that we're till we got a plan for the next one, our adjournment. Anybody want to go home yet?
Before we do, will we have a meeting on the 18th, which would be the 3rd?
That'll be up to the next council member.
Eight.
That's regularly, I think it's regularly scheduled. So if it's canceled, then at the 11th, then it would still take place.
Okay, so I've got it on my calendar.
Yep. All right. Y'all ready to go?
I moved. So we adjourn the meeting.
Can I say something?
Yep.
Does everybody know that we hired a new police officer?
No.
Yeah.
Missed that one of my city administrator
Yes,
reports.
I know. I'm sorry.
that
I'm
happened.
saying, we need,
Yeah.
it would have been nice to have it on the website.
And we don't have water.
That would be kind of a flash thing. All right. I just wanted to mention that.
That had been in the works for a little while, and I lost the ball when the start date was, and Councilmember Bunker alluded me to that fact before I had a chance to talk with the police chief and get that update. So it missed when I was working on my report and I forgot it. But yes, we do have a new police officer coming in part-time, replacing Officer Germa. I'm blanking on her name right now.
Ashley something.
Ashley, yeah.
Yes.
She's
Set her up yet? What? Have we put her on the payroll system yet? I don't think we have that. Ashley.
She was working Saturday.
yeah. So
I don't know that we pulled the trigger yet, but
she did her first patrol one way or another on Saturday, and she's projected to help us out on the weekends, work with us on the weekends, and so that'll help replace or fix some of the staffing issues we had in the police department. We're hopeful.
Do we still have the rest of our officers?
Yeah, we still so we have with her coming, we still have our 3 part-time officers plus our police chief.
Yeah, they need to be listed on the website, at least the police department website. And I'd like to see.
I've already
pictures,
tried
too.
that.
there's some legal / best practice stuff that says you really don't want to do that, so.
Okay.
I know people like to see that, they think everything's fine, but then there's times when there's bad actors get in there and start doing things, and the nature of police work, most people don't, most cities don't do that.
Okay, that's good.
I didn't know. There's no increase in our budget. There's still 2 full-time equivalent people. It's just we're filling the other full-time position with 3 people, all part-time.
All right. I make a motion.
I just want to say that I want to thank the volunteer fire department and the Caldwell County Sheriff for assisting me on an assault that I witnessed on Saturday in the afternoon. And the Caldwell County Sheriff came promptly and the volunteer fire department helped the victim who was severely beaten, and I witnessed it. So I want to thank the fire department and the Caldwell County Sheriff. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a motion to adjourn.
My
Do we have
second.
a- Who was
Lisa
that?
second. Lisa.
Sam, you ready to go?
Yes, over.
Mike, you ready to go?
Yo.
And Jan, you ready to go?
Yes.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you, and thank everybody for the grant work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good job.